Councillor Mark Reach. I'm the Chairman of the Committee and Cabinet Member for Good Homes. The meeting will be live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel and recording will be available after the meeting. Subtitles can be switched on. Advice on how to turn these on is set out online. Everyone please make sure the mobile phones are turned off or on silent and remind members and officers to use microphones. In the unlikely event it's necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all instructions given to you by our team. So, turning to the agenda, so we have apologies from Councillor Clear. That's everyone, yeah. And then disclosure of interests. Any disclosure of interests, please? No? Very good. Any councillors representing? Councillor Batho on the...
I don't know whether Councillor Batho was wishing to speak on the Venter item.
Okay, no, he's not. He's shaking his head. Ignore me. So we have no councillors registered to speak. And we have no public participation, no one registered to speak there either. So we'll move to the agenda. Agenda item number 5 is minutes of the previous meeting held on the 4th of November. Can I take those as agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. No announcements for me, so we'll move straight into the new homes presentation, please, which starts at page 23 in your agenda. Just give Caroline a second to pull the presentation up on the screen.
Thank you for that. Yeah, let me just share my screen. Oh. Yeah, there we go. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Reach. So this is our standard new homes update. The first 3 slides, I'm just going to run through what we've been up to over the past few months since we last met, and give a couple of slides around scheme viability and subsidy, which was a particular request of this meeting, which is fine. And then I'll go into my normal sort of forecast statistics slides, which I'm not going to spend ages on as they're a relatively standing item in the presentation. But obviously any questions, just let me know if I'm going a bit too fast through them. So first off, on the new homes programme update. So we've had a busy few months in the team. Kingsbarton, where we're acquiring 146 units through a Section 106. That's been progressing well. Phase 3AI is now completed by Carla, and all the affordable units have been handed over in that phase to us. So that was 10 flats just before Christmas, 4 shared ownership and 6 affordable rent. And then 8 houses were handed over to us in January this year, all affordable rent. So for the rest of the scheme, construction is continuing over the next few years, and obviously we'll keep you updated as those units come through to us. Hazy Road, Twyford is another Section 106 acquisition for us. That's on site, broadly on time, a couple of weeks behind just because of the weather that's been experienced recently, but they're broadly doing well with that. And just a reminder, that's a much smaller acquisition, so 10 affordable units, 6 rent and 4 shared ownership. I continue to have lots of discussions with the market, trying to identify new opportunities that might be coming forward. Both in terms of Section 106 acquisitions and additionality units. That's a particular focus at the moment for the team, and I'll obviously keep updated on how we're going with that. Woodman Close, Sparsholt, that's obviously a land-led council-built site, which was approved by Cabinet in November last year. The build contractor has commenced enabling works on the site now. They're going through the final sign-off of the planning conditions, and they're hoping to formally start on site in late March, early April this year. The really good news on that is that late last year we were awarded our Homes England funding for the scheme, which is obviously really good news from our point of view. So really pleased with that one at the moment. And then on our further commission schemes that we're looking to progress, we've been working through quite a lot of sites, trying to identify the next ones that we're going to be bringing forward. So lots of feasibility work is ongoing with those. Finally, on this slide, the housing development strategy for 2025 to 2032, which was approved by Cabinet in November last year. That's now up on our website, and I've just included the link in the presentation for ease. So then just a couple of slides on scheme viability and subsidy. This was something that was just requested I run through. Obviously happy to take any questions on it. This gives a broad overview of how we look at the viability of schemes when we're considering new opportunities. Really high level, these two slides. So, you know, obviously happy to delve into any more detail, you know, at the end of the presentation. So the viability of a scheme, we assess it and consider it in terms of its whole life cost. So that is how much would it cost to build, plus other on costs and other professional fees, etc., that we'd need to build that scheme out. But then also its ongoing maintenance and repair for the life of that of those units that we're constructing. And then we consider that against the rental and sales income from that scheme that we're building. So that's the broad principle. So to fund a scheme, we'll look to borrow from the Public Works Loan Board after we've taken account of any sales income from shared ownership units, if there happen to be any on the scheme. The rental income from any rented units contributes to paying back the cost of borrowing against that Public Works Loan Board. So in our business plan, we forecast the borrowing costs from those loans for our, assuming we are building 1,000 homes between 2020 and 2032, and that borrowing cost is assumed to be repaid all the way up to 2054. If we're looking at a scheme and the rental income won't fully cover the borrowing costs that we'd need, so you've taken off the fact that you've got sales income, capital income from selling parts of shared ownership, if the rest that you need to borrow, the rental income won't cover the cost of that loan, then you can use subsidy, capital subsidy, to plug the gap, essentially. So there are various forms of subsidy that we can use. Council subsidy, mainly, is our right to buy receipts, which is a certain pot of money. And then a separate pot of money is our Section 106 affordable housing commuted sums. So they're amounts we get through Section 106 agreements. If there is, for example, no affordable housing on site, we might get a commuted sum from a developer in lieu of that. And that's a separate pot of money. So in terms of right to buy receipts, we can, and well, for both of those forms of subsidy, we can only use them on certain types of schemes, and there are certain government rules around that. So right to buy receipts can be used on basically anything in terms of new build. So we can use it on all our new build schemes, any acquisitions. I've said that add to council stock. That means if you're, say, regenerating an area, you can only use it on the net gain of units. You can't put it, if you're replacing like for like, you can't use it. You have to have additional units being built. And that includes Section 106 acquisition. So you can use your right to buy receipts on acquiring Section 106 units. The Section 106 affordable commuted sums can only be used on our council new build schemes and additionality units. So you can't use those on acquiring Section 106 units. It's sort of considered double counting by government. The other form of subsidy, as we know, is Homes England grant. So I just thought it'd be helpful to put in the average grant rates across our district that's been recognised. This is in our area. And that's for the previous programme, which is just finishing. So that's broad, you know, as an average social rent, they're giving 125,000 a unit, affordable rent 60,000 a unit, and shared ownership 50,000 a unit. Again, it's not exactly that for every scheme, but that's a broad idea of the amounts that they give. You're, I'm sure, all aware of the Social and Affordable Homes Programme 2026 to 2036, which is recently, well, it's in the process of being launched. Lots of information coming out about that at the moment from obviously Homes England themselves and also from the Local Government Association. Bids for schemes under that new programme will be submitted from mid-February, so mid this month at the earliest. They haven't quite launched the new system yet. And then that will be awarding grant from April this year. Just to finally on this bit, just to give an idea of subsidy on our own schemes, I thought it'd be helpful just to pick out two recent schemes that we've done, which are sort of almost opposite ends of the scale in a way, and they both have their pros and cons in different ways. Woodman Close in Sparsholt, which is a land-led scheme for social rent, so the most affordable tenure. because of a small scheme in a rural area with some abnormal costs, we all know, as it went through cabinet, much discussion, that this is a really high build cost here, but we were able to put our own subsidy into that as well as the Homes England subsidy. And because we were successful in that, I'm pleased to say we got £127,500 per unit from Homes England. And then we applied £200,000 per unit of our own Section 106 commuted sum. Other end of the scale, as it were, Kings Barton, we're acquiring a big, massive units, but they're for affordable rent and shared ownership. So different tenures, a blend of tenures there. We've used our right to buy receipt funding of £7,000 per unit on average across those 146 units. So that gives an idea of the difference in subsidy. But there's so many different, the schemes are so wildly different, you can't really compare them necessarily, but it just gives a broad feel for, the very different types of scheme that we do as a team.
Any questions just at this point before we move on? Councillor Power.
Thank you, Jen. I've got 3 questions. First of all, about the Public Works Loan Board rates. How are you factoring in the variation depending on when you plan to draw down this money? I have a slight concern about the fact that we get grants to fund units may unnecessarily inflate tender prices to build out. And I've forgotten the third question.
Well, that's no bad thing, because I find it hard to recall all 3 back. So if it comes back to you, let me know. So the Public Works Loan Board rate, obviously I work really closely with our finance team, finance colleagues on that whenever we do an appraisal. We'll do a sensitivity analysis whenever we do an appraisal. So we'll run it at the current interest rate that we think we'll receive, but then we'll go up and down so that we can see how that would affect the viability of the scheme. And we'll tend to err on the side of caution generally when we're running appraisals anyway. In terms of your question on grants, Homes England have benchmark build costs that they use. So when we submit a bid, we'll have to obviously be totally open in terms of if we acquired the land, how much for, what the build costs are, what the abnormal costs are, what the on costs are, what our finance rate is, etc. They'll see all of that in the bid, and if they think it's wrong, wildly different, etc., then they just won't fund it. So, and obviously we also use a tender process. On Sparshort, for example, we used an open tender to let the whole market bid, so that there weren't any issues with framework prices and things like that. So there's a few ways we counteract that.
Carry on.
Thank you, Chairman. Particularly where we've acquired units and where we have built out schemes, have we ever had difficulty finding tenants for those units?
That sits in a different team to me, but that's not me wanting to sort of push it off. But my understanding is that generally, we have a high need in all the areas that we deal in. There are some units that are more popular than others, as it were, but we're well aware of that, and I have lots and lots of communication with our housing allocations team, so I'm well aware of the units that are more or less popular.
Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Thank you for your chance so far, Caroline. Could I just remind us, affordable versus social? Many people bunch everything together. Delighted that we're doing social in my ward, as you know, but obviously we're buying a lot of units in the affordable category in the Kings Barton example you gave to us. Can you remind us what proportion we're looking to do social versus affordable in the new build as you perceive it over the next few years where you have projects outlined, please?
It's a good question. I can't give you that figure off the top of my head, partly because it really depends scheme on scheme, looking at the viability as to what tenure we might use. In my mind, on a land-led commission scheme where we already own the land, such as Sparshort, I would be really, really pushing for social rent tenure on that. Also because Homes England have said they want at least 60% of all units in the next programme being social rent. So we obviously really want to respond to that. A lot of that grant funding will be for social rent units, and you can see there that you obviously get more grants, which makes total sense. But there is the reality that on a Section 106 acquisition of units, where we're in a market where RPs would often be bidding on an affordable rent tenure basis. If we're interested in being in that market, we often are looking at an affordable rent tenure on that product. But we will always, every opportunity we look at, we will assess it on a social rent, affordable rent, shared ownership. What's the best mix? What works for the need, etc. We'll be looking at all different ways before we decide which way we think is the best way to go.
Thank you.
Would you like to carry on, please?
As I said, I'll go relatively speedily through these next ones, but at the end, obviously, please do, I can go back to any slides if needed. So we've updated our baseline, which was currently 341 units since 2020 that we've delivered as a team, and then looking at our sort of high, likely and low figures as to how that will go up to 2032. And then the next two slides break down that pipeline of opportunity by both the number of schemes, which is on this slide, broken into what types of scheme they are, for example, commissioned, which is sort of land-led, or Section 106, or additionality, and rural. And then this slide looks at it in terms of the numbers of units within those schemes. So hopefully familiar to most people in the room. Again, we've updated our figures in terms of RP and our own delivery up until 2032. Our distribution map, which I hope is up to date. A few schemes have moved from early stage to on-site, which is obviously pleasing. And that's the list of those and the numbers against them as of today. And so obviously this is in the agenda pack, so obviously to read at everyone's leisure. And then finally, a slide on our demand data, which we look at a lot in terms of where should we be going next. In terms of the key areas. That's just a reminder, that's updated every year, and so the last update was in October last year, but the broad principles of where the most demand is doesn't tend to change too significantly. And that's my last slide, but obviously happy, I'll come out of the presentation, but obviously happy to.
Well, would you stay in presentation for 1 second?
Yeah,
Sorry, just
fine.
because that last slide's quite short, quite small.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I mean, would you just call out the kind of the areas where we see, the highest demand across the district? I think that would be useful, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, where the big blue circles are. So obviously Winchester itself, but interesting ones as, for example, Bishop's Waltham, Denmead, Alresford, and Kingsworthy. They're the ones where you can really see those bigger blue areas. But obviously, lots of what we're looking at is also need versus likelihood of other schemes coming forward. So even if there's an area that has what appears to be less need, actually, if there's going to be very little development there from the market, we may obviously be wanting to look at that as well.
So I guess you characterise that last slide as being the demand is, as you said, Winchester Town, the market towns, and then the kind of border down near Portsmouth and Fareham, so Wickham, Denmead and Whiteley. Thank you. Is that fair? Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's brilliant. I mean, that's really helpful. It's also great to see the 341 homes completed. That's a really, really good number. Any questions from colleagues before we move on?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to be a broken record, but last time I asked about extra care at Kings Barton, I don't see it on the list. I read in one of the reports before us today that we hope to have 2 extra care schemes. I just don't know where and when, and this one's been on the agenda for a very long time, but I'd be grateful for more knowledge about that, please.
I don't disagree. I think, we're really keen to see what's happening at Kings Barton, and I'm meeting with Carla on Wednesday this week to try and get more of an update from them. It's helpful that we have the 146 units that we're acquiring, because we have now, lots and lots of dialogue with them, but it's important we keep pushing them on what's happening on that extra care and wider neighbourhood area. My understanding is they don't know yet. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I'm going to see them on Wednesday and hopefully get a bit more of an answer, and then I can report back to Councillor Reach as to what's happening we can go from there. But yes, I don't disagree that it's taking longer than we had hoped.
Chair, can I just ask a supplementary, because obviously the older person strategy was delayed. Does extra care and that type of provision, are we looking at that differently in the context of the older person strategy, the Hampshire County Council input to that, so that we can better understand that provision for the whole district? It would be helpful to understand where we're heading on that, given that piece of work was postponed. Thank you.
Karen?
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Yes, I'm not sure if many of you are aware, but we now have a legal obligation to produce a supported housing strategy. We've had our new burdens funding, which is commented on in the housing strategy paper, and we're waiting for guidance, and that has to be adopted and ready to go from April 2027. Extra care is included in that definition of supported housing. So we are likely to maybe do an older person's review more of our own stock, rather than a wider strategy to start with, and see what the findings are from the supported housing strategy, which we're waiting from the MHCLG's formula on what data we can use. So until we receive that guidance, and then we have to work in partnership with Hampshire County Council and Adult Services, because that's part of the remit for the new strategy. So if that has to be adopted by April next year, we'll have to have that finished by Christmas Eve this year to go through our governance process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No, great. Oh, thank you. That's really, really helpful. Yeah, keep up the good work. So we'll move on now to agenda item 8, which is the retrofit presentation. Prashanta, over to you. I'll give you a second to get set up.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Yeah, so we'll be doing our usual retrofit update. I'll take you through the properties, the measures and the targets, and explain a bit more about the changes that we're looking to do with regards to increasing numbers. We'll be looking at the retrofit programme update on SHF Wave 3, the Swedish cottages, the conservation area windows, and then future projects, some of them already in the process, so Winnell blocks, and then the multi-unit properties, and then finally just our tenant engagement. So these are the targets which everyone's most familiar with. Some of the targets had to drop on the SHF Wave 3 because of the administrative lag that comes with the funding. We have since looked at alternative ways of delivering this, and I'll explain a little bit in the next slide. The conservation area single glazed windows are going on smoothly. We've had a little bit of a hiccup in terms of the fabrication of windows, but we still see majority of those windows being completed in this financial year. And then response repairs and planned maintenance windows will complete again by this end of this financial year. So just looking at the diagram of the pie charts that most of you are familiar with, we had originally anticipated from that 2025 to 2026 that we would decrease the number of EPC D and below properties by slightly less than we are now anticipating. So we've improved it by a few percentages, and that's really because of a number of things that we looked at internally as a team to unpack what our current strategy is and how can we better it. So the 13% that we're left with in 2028 are basically 13% EPC and below, D and below, and in most cases we would have gotten rid of our E, F and G in terms of uplifting them to a C. That 13% does not include any response repair, retrofit, neither does it include any of the blocks that obviously we're piloting at the moment. So we cannot at present forecast what we hope to uplift in the blocks, but we will, in the course of the piloting over the next 3 years, we'll be able to schedule that and forecast that in a better way. So that 13% is really something we hope to improve on. So really in looking at how do we accelerate our delivery, we feel we certainly are doing the best in terms of getting our contractors on board, but what else can we do? And so what we've done as a team is just looked at reorganizing the delivery to increase those numbers, which is why we've gained that additional 3%. And it's really starting to look at experts to deliver their piece of work, which means that we should see a lot more numbers in this next quarter. This basically was a result of analysis done by the team in terms of how do we streamline, how do we get this better, and how do we learn from what we've done so far. And ultimately, everyone's always pleased by the fact that this new way of delivering will improve costs. So we should be in a better place to increase the numbers with the cost savings. The Swedish cottages, we're still trying as best we can to hold our residents, and we continue to do and provide support. We have the 14 homes that have had new roofs and new windows. There are remedial works on that, and there is a contractor on site. The weather has not been in our favour in January, so we continue to be delayed on that. But we're constantly pressing the contractor to make progress where he can. We completed a really interesting piece of work, which we call the Swedish Customer Matrix. And really what it looks to do is to unpack where each household is in terms of the work carried out, in terms of the disruption, but the needs and the support of each household. And that really helps us to put in place a next step business plan. And that's really what we're hoping to do, is that each individual house will receive custom support in terms of what is the next steps in terms of the type of work we hope to do, and how can we support them through that. The fourth site, which is the Coltme site, which we hadn't actually started, we're looking at alternative ways, but we will support those tenants through that piece of work. And really, we're ultimately going to be looking at a revised specification in order to get those properties up to an EPCC with less major disruption that we've seen. So a lot of lessons learned, a lot of making sure that our residents on this particular project are supported as they so well need to be. We also have a resident liaison officer on the team, Judith Hubbard, who's joined us today. And so we're very excited to be working with Judith to help us further support our residents where we can. As I said, the conservation area windows single glaze is still well on its way, with really good testimonials from a lot of our residents, and we're feeling very pleased about that program. And really the answer of the other bits that I was explaining about going to expertise comes out of this, is that we went to expert window installers and manufacturers, and we basically got the results we wanted. So a lot of positives that we've taken from that delivery. The order properties are still in process. We are looking for clerk of works in order to help us with that, but we are in constant communication with the contractor to make sure that those properties and homes are not forgotten. And the Winnall retrofit, so we've had some progress. We've presented to some internal stakeholders in terms of where we are, what the retrofit looks like. We're collaborating with planned and compliance teams. At the moment, we've got a high level scope, and we're just adding costs to that scope. And really the next steps are just to understand the gravity and the impact of this project, not only in terms of the residents that are that are needing that plan, but also in terms of the physical technicalities of upgrading. Heating will impact the grid and what that looks like. So the timing of when we engage our residents and when we know definitively technically what we're doing is quite critical. We are currently on the way with our block pilots. We've had energy assessments carried out. They continue to be carried out, which really gives us a better idea of our data and helps us to fine tune that pilot block scheme. So ultimately from the 12, we're looking for 5. It's very diverse in its selection at 12. So there's a lot of non-trads, different tenure types, as well as different construction types, which will give us a good feel for how we carry forward after the pilots are delivered. We're at procurement stage, so beginning to look at contractors, speak to contractors, and see again how we tap into those specialist contractors to ensure we deliver right. And at the moment, we're currently developing our tenant engagement strategies, which is an enormous piece, which is started. But what we're looking at is basically ultimately there'll be an umbrella tenant engagement strategy, and then that will have a spin-off depending on what tenure we're dealing with. It will have a spin-off strategy so that we can ensure that all residents within our multi-unit blocks are supported. And we're currently in the process of creating our detailed project plan. Tenant engagement, as I said, we've got a resident liaison officer, which we're very excited about. The Swedish cottages, we're really looking to begin phase 3, which is those in-person home visits, so that those can support the individual custom business plans for each of those homes, to make sure that the right outcome is thought for that individual home. Our tenant engagement strategy is underway, as I've explained. The SHF and window programs, we have in-person visits and the solar panel agreement. So I know every time I present, we have councillors offering their time, and I'm always very appreciative of this. The solar panel agreements take a lot of time and require a lot of capacity. So if you're out and about and feel like you can take on board some explaining of what it is we're doing with solar, we'd very much welcome the help on that. And lastly, in order to reach those residents that don't necessarily make it to our forums, we're developing this video. So for those of you that have the slide deck and will be presented obviously on the internet, have a look. It's still in draft, but we're very excited about the fact that we're able to talk through what we do through video formats, and that will be dispersed on the website, on our correspondence. It will be a link and it will be a QR code. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you. It's really interesting. I mean, obviously there's a lot of technical detail in there and numbers. Can you just give a sense of what it actually means for a tenant, to move from EPC D, E, F to C in terms of living costs, running costs and comfort and the like, just to bring it alive, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I think in the vast majority, EPC-C means what? Nothing to most people. But it's really important that an EPC is generated of the likes of what your insulation is in your property, both your loft insulation and your cavity wall insulation. So you lose 35% of your heating through your loft, through your roof. So if you don't have any loft insulation, that's 35% of your heating gone. And you lose 15% of your heating through your walls. So once again, it's a significant amount. Just by adding cavity wall insulation and loft insulation, you're retaining a vast amount of your heating in your home. That ultimately means less heating of the atmosphere, more heating of your home, more heat retention, and less bills, because you can imagine that running your boiler or your electric storage heater to heat a space that's uninsulated is going to cost you a lot more. On average, we're looking at a saving of about £150 to £200 a year, just with the cavity wall insulation, loft insulation and the ventilation. But with solar panels, we're forecasting about 300, 350 on an average property. And ultimately what the solar panels do is that if the fabric is completed, it just means that all those electric running washing machines, dishwashers, irrespective of whether you're on electric or gas, you all of a sudden are able to use the excess energy receiving from solar panels into your continuous and daily electric use. So most people say, well, it rains most of the year. So what we've done is obviously included batteries, which are essential when you're using solar. Solar on itself is great, but obviously you can only make use of it in the middle of the day when the sun is shining. But you add a battery and all of a sudden it makes that piece of equipment work for you in a way that it wouldn't have worked before. And that's really the magic of the system. So adding solar as well as the cavity wall insulation and loft insulation allows us all of a sudden to make your home warmer, decrease the heat loss, but also feed your home with free energy, making your home cheaper to run, healthier to live in, and of course, more comfortable for everyone in the home.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you. It's about the EPCC uplifts. So over the last couple of years, it's gone up maybe 1 or 2%. And I appreciate you've got a higher target for 2028 of 81%. So that's a 16% rise we're expecting over the next 2 years. I'm just wondering if you feel like that is achievable with the current resource that you have, and also that progress is relatively slow at the moment. So I'm just wondering what's needed, what extra is needed to accelerate that progress, or what's holding back the progress? Is it funding? Is it skills? Is it resources or engagement with the contractors? Just wanted to understand a bit more.
Thank you, Councillor. Great question. I think absolutely your numbers are spot on. It's been incredibly difficult, and as a team we work really hard. And I think what we have in our favour, which is often what I present to internal stakeholders, is that we're really fortunate, and I'm really fortunate to work with incredibly competent colleagues in the retrofit team. I've got a number of project managers that have worked in the construction industry for 30 odd years. I have a finance accountant who's now a retrofit coordinator who unpicks the sums. And what comes with that is the ability to ensure that our contractors are delivering correctly on site for the right price. Now, I of course don't do this in isolation, and I'm always speaking to our peers. And in many of our peer groups, we either have people paying the price to deliver the numbers they are held against. So in many instances, they'll say, I'm paying way through above and beyond to get this delivered, or they just don't have the capacity to check works on site. So I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm definitely not saying that, but I'm saying when there are faults on site, we cannot hand on heart say, let's speed on the numbers. And that's ultimately been the most difficult part, is that we've got a great competent team. We've got a great set of specifications. But when we don't feel that that delivery is correct for the right number, we cannot speed ahead. So this is essentially why we relooked at it as a team, as in what is and isn't working. And certainly learning from the window program, if we go to expertise, so at the moment we've gone to the main contractors who usually get most of the retrofit work because they're kind of spinning a lot of plates in terms of subcontractors. But what we've looked at is if we look at going to expertise to ensure they deliver that piece of work that they're experts in, we're able to accelerate. So that's really where the optimism comes in the 15%, is the ability to accelerate at different places in order to ensure that we're not necessarily impacting one household for a long period of time, therefore exhausting the resident. But at the same time, we have, forgive the phrase, different horses in the race, making sure that we're taking that EPC, but we're also following it through with the fabric. So it really is just unpacking what have we done in the last 2 years and how can we get this better and more streamlined. And we're really hoping that we can achieve that 15% forecast.
Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. I would add on the Swedish cottages retrofit that because heating has been improved so much, there is greater willingness to benefit in those houses. Even though they're not finished, we are seeing more fresh air in those houses, and I think that's an unquantifiable benefit, but I appreciate it. A few questions on the numbers. I've seen later in the papers today that the Winnow retrofit is 0.9 of a million. Is that to complete the job, or is that for the feasibility works? And if so, how many units will that benefit? Secondly, on the blocks work, we have a large number of leasehold residents, and I would like to know if you are getting proper engagement and communication with those residents, and whether your local councillors can do anything to ease your path. And yet again, I've forgotten the third question.
Thank you. Let me know when you remember. Well, thank you. No, that's really useful questions. So I think on Winnow, it's really important to know that it's a collaborative piece of work. So it's not just retrofit. We're looking at plan maintenance and compliance. So the figure doesn't necessarily look at just improving a number of properties. It's ensuring that the entire scheme is looked at holistically. So we serve all residents in those properties, making sure that those homes are equal in terms of benefiting. And that's really where that collaboration piece comes in play. It is quite a complex project because of the collaboration required. And that's really why we didn't want to steer from just isolating retrofit, because if you're putting scaffolding for retrofit, then why not do everything else that needed? So the numbers in terms of who we're improving, it literally is a holistic scheme. We will impact all residents in that home. As it stands, that's the collaborative piece we're working on. But there are obviously balancing acts that we have to take into account and the financial implications of that. So it's a journey that we're on at the moment, but we will obviously update as soon as we get more certainty. In terms of the blocks and the leaseholders, we're right at the tip of the iceberg at the moment. So as soon as we begin to understand which of the pilot properties we're using as or utilizing as this kind of first step in terms of understanding multi-units, and we understand the tenures within there, we will definitely reach out for engagement. So I believe we've already sent out a standing letter to say, look, we are doing some work, we might be doing some work in these blocks to some councillors, just a heads up. That's not necessarily finalized because we're doing a lot of retrofit assessments, and ultimately that gives us all the data we need to make sure, yes, actually it is an EPCD and below. It does need more than just us putting some bits of insulation, and actually it can benefit from repairs and some TLC. And that's ultimately what I've said to the team, is that where we go to multi-unit property, we need to make sure that it's not just lifting the EPC for the sake of lifting the EPC. It's making sure we make an impact on that building, and that is required. So as soon as we've defined those 5, we will definitely reach out and make sure our tenant engagement strategies suit each of those properties. Have you remembered your third?
That's a no, I take it. Sorry, I was looking at my notes. And I think we've looked at similar retrofits in, I'm sure there's London Borough, I can't remember which one, Southwark maybe, just Lewisham, sorry, with disrespect to Lewisham, and to look kind of best practice to see, you know, what we might do. And so we are looking to learn lessons from elsewhere, I think. Councillor Horrell was next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the update, Presenter. I'm intrigued by the Swedish customer matrix, and thank you for just explaining that. So am I right in understanding that that's an individual matrix per household? And if so, how many of those do we have if you're tailoring it to those individual properties? And my other question relates to the 2 million that we set aside in the budget forecast for retrofit on retrofit, not through your good office, but through the works not being done to standard. I don't see that talked about here, or is that subsumed into some of the other project updates? But where are we on that, please? Because obviously that's a big cost to the council on work that we were hoping would have delivered more successfully than it has to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. So in terms of the Swedish cottages, of the properties that need that TLC and individual support, it's 17 properties, and we certainly feel we can give them that support. And it won't just be run by the retrofit team. We'll be holding the space. We'll be looking at our housing services teams to help us to make sure that we understand the resident in there, understand their needs, and put together a plan for them. So it's certainly not just run by ourselves. So it'll be across board, and 17 is a small number. And then in terms of the budget and the audit, I spoke about the audit. We are looking for a clerk of works, and the contractor is very keen to work with us, but we need to ensure we've got a representative. So we've unfortunately had somebody that left us and wasn't necessarily had the expertise required. As soon as we have that resource, we will be looking to work with the contractor. But in the back, which is what I hadn't spoken about, so apologies. But in the background, we are working with the contractor to identify which properties they are, identify what measures they've had, and certainly the financial forecast for that is one that is an estimation at this point in time. The contractor has confirmed that they will pick up any defects that they're liable for.
Thank you.
And I think there's further detail, page 29. If we go back in the presentation, at the bottom of that slide sets that out. And the two, I mean, we talked about that 2 million figure in the HRA medium-term business planning, which I can't remember, it was previous meeting. That figure will move depending on settlement from contractors, and there's a commercial settlement to be done there. So watch this space. Obviously, we'll come back and update the committee as and when we have more information. Councillor Becker.
Thank you. You won't be surprised to know that I'm really happy to see the Winnell retrofit moving forward, and the blocks retrofit, as my ward encompasses both the Winnell site plus lots of blocks of flats. I know I've asked this regularly at this meeting, but can you just explain a bit more of what the collaborative approach looks like for Winnell? As Councillor Power alluded to, we do have lots of leaseholders in those blocks, and they require a different approach than our regular tenants in those blocks. If you could explain that a little bit more, that would be brilliant. Also, just to highlight that as ward councillors, we remain more than happy to assist, and we really would like to be involved in those discussions as they move forward, please.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we did reach out to you when we did the internal presentation. Unfortunately, I think you were engaged, but we're happy to present this if you'd like to yourself to understand what we were looking at, just from a retrofit point of view.
Yeah, I mean, we're a team of 3, so we
No,
work
that's
as a
fine.
team. So
there's a separate side, so let me know if you'd like that. But in terms of what the collaborative piece is, so there's obviously a bucket of compliance and a bucket of planned, which overlaps retrofit because we've got windows, for instance, it's retrofit and planned. We have internal meetings which are incredibly useful, where we project and program what our next steps and milestones are. At this present time, we are at a point of understanding what the offer will be, what the cost implication of that is, and mostly when do we start engaging with residents. Obviously, engaging too soon pushes us into having to make commitments that we're not certain about. And because the project is huge and has such an impact on, say, for instance, the grid upgrade, it's quite technical, but actually, if we're changing heating, we need to understand that actually the power that feeds those blocks is sufficient. So engaging with residents right this minute is kind of premature because we don't even know if it's a possibility, if there's a question mark. So, you know, looking at kind of heating, windows, insulation at the top and the bottom, understanding, you know, do we do a little bit more when we're out there? Do we, uplift each of the units? These are all the questions that are presented, and we usually work with our tenant services to understand, what the next step is and what engagement looks like. So it is very much a consistent. I think there are 4 weeks in length in terms of when we come together. So the next steps are just making sure what is the must-haves and what is the nice-to-haves and what does that mean financially. That's with regards to Winnell. And then with regards to the multi-unit, absolutely. As soon as we are homed in on our 5 pilot properties, we'll be reaching out to all councillors to help us. And I know that's something that Judith really champions, is using our councillors. And now we've got a dedicated resource. We really hope to do that a lot more. Thank you.
Councillor White.
It was on a similar line. I think it might have been answered really. You mentioned about ward councillors helping with the solar panel tenant engagement and how difficult that had been. And I just wondered what that looked like in a practical sense. Should we liaise with you? Are there target properties already identified? I think you kind of said you would reach out to us, did you?
Thank you. Thanks very much. So really what we're looking at is, because the description and understanding of what that agreement is can make many of our residents hesitate to signing up to solar, especially certain demographics. We would welcome explaining the details of the agreement and what the scheme proposes, so that when you're out and about in the community, you can use that opportunity maybe to reassure or to introduce residents to the concept. So when we come, either with a phone call or with a visit, they've already been, kind of heard about the positives. We certainly have a lot of positive kind of referrals, a lot of tenants coming forward. We've had over 100 sign-ups, so it's not something that we're needing to persuade. It's just trying to reach the numbers essentially. So we're happy to set up a dedicated councillor briefing, if you like, on that. And that way maybe councillors can help. And it's just literally just saying, look, it's really positive. It will help you with your builds, and the team will support you through the process. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, it's really good and well done, because it's a really complicated area with lots of moving parts doing different things and very technical as well. So that was really helpful. I think there were just a couple of actions in there. One was to just around the Winnell blocks to make sure the ward councillors are kept up to speed, which I'm sure is straightforward. And then let's look at doing a kind of retrofit and solar presentation for members so that they are kind of empowered to go out and talk to their communities. I think that'd be great. So thank you very much. Really good. Thank you again. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. So we'll move on to agenda item number 9, which is the housing strategy review of year 2. Starts at page 33 in your agenda pack. I think Yvonne, is this you? No, Karen. Sorry, it's Karen. Sorry, Karen. So what the purpose of this paper is to look back over the last couple of years to see what we've achieved. We've already, I mean, it's broadly split into 4 areas. So we've got more homes, greener homes, homes that meet different needs, and better managed homes and neighbourhoods. We've talked a lot about the first 2. So we obviously have the new homes presentation. We've talked a lot about greener homes, which is the retrofit is the bulk of that work. So at the risk of, knackering whatever you've written for your introduction, I guess we could focus on those other 2 areas, which are the bit we haven't done much in this meeting yet, which are the last 2. And then I think also there's a really helpful part of the paper starting at page 47, looking at risks and challenges ahead. And particularly, there's quite a lot of information there on the Renters' Rights Act, which places a whole raft of new requirements upon Winchester City Council. So, hoping I haven't completely torpedoed your plans for the introduction, Karen, can I pass over to you to talk us through the paper, please?
Thank you, Councillor Reach. Thank you. Yes, so this is our second paper that we've brought to Housing Committee regarding our housing strategy that was adopted in November 23. So it's the strategy that sets out our vision for our housing aspirations from 2023 to 2028. And we agreed in November 23 that we would bring back a report each year to update on progress. And really the paper sort of outlines the progress we've made against those 4 priorities. It also highlights any new challenges that have arisen since we adopted the strategy, because it's a forever evolving subject and there's always new challenges, and then it looks at those new challenges and how we're going to address those. I think for me, when I was writing the paper and pulling it all together, it shows the inordinate amount of work that is being carried out by the housing service and our wider services within the council, in addition to our business as usual. And so I really haven't got anything further to add to that, Councillor Reach, and I'm quite very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
No, thank you. And one thing just to shout out here, the feedback I think we've got 2 members of the TAC board in the room, always very welcome. Thanks for coming along. One thing that we don't do is celebrate success, and obviously we're quite right being quite tough on ourselves, but there's a lot of good stuff in here that we've done. So I think we should recognise that fact. But mindful of the challenges that are set out at the kind of second part of the paper. So I look to, and it went 1, 2, 3. So Caroline Hurrell, Councillor Hurrell, sorry.
Thank you. And yes, I think it's fair to say that the paper does just outline how much is going on and how many curveballs we have to deal with when government tells us this new rule or this amount of money that we are or are not receiving. So my first question I wanted to raise, Karen, please, is if we were to have a reduced homeless prevention grant or the stopping of that, the impact that's going to have on us, because the discretionary grant element for the service is important, and what's our backstop, what's our plan for that, because those sort of monetary things sit over us and obviously will impact our ability to deliver. The other element that strikes us all, of course, which is has some really great things in it, of course, is the move on private rented and some better clarity for residents on that. But the work that comes our way in terms of registration, enforcement, following up on the 8,600 properties that you've detailed in the paper. And I know that there's a thought that we can have some level of additional officer support, but we don't receive enough money again to actually do the best job for what is a very significant number of properties. And again, you know, is that something as a total housing service we should be looking at? Because it just feels that maybe the support for the rented side is not probably as sufficient as we would like, but we're constrained by all those other factors. So be grateful for any thoughts that you have. I know it may be early days, but we do need to plan for some of these things pretty quickly. Thank you.
And just before I pass over, I would say on the part of the reason I asked for the Renters' Right Act primarily to be included is just because this is new, and you know, this is it's great for people in the private rented sector, but the impact it will have on the market, that it will have on standards, that it will have on organisations such as us, it is not clear at the moment. Certainly the jargonistic term new burdens funding that we get will not touch the sides, I would say, of, you know, if you were to do this properly. We will do the best we can, and we have a plan for how we might be able to do that with the limited resource government has offered. One of the first steps in this is just to ensure there's awareness. So we're working with colleagues at neighbouring authorities who are also, you know, we're all going to be in the same boat here, and we've got planned engagement events with landlords and letting agents as well, because they are, you know, going to quite a bit often be the gatekeepers here. The challenge we'll face is good landlords and ones who take care of their properties and their tenants, of course, will be engaged and come along. The ones that this is really targeting are the ones who probably won't bother coming along, would be my guess. So there's an element of suck it and see, but I think on the whole, you know, this is a very positive development for people in the private rented sector, but quite what the impacts will be on us, we're not clear at the moment. Karen?
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. I'll address the first question first, which is about the homeless prevention grant. So since I've written the paper, we have had an announcement of our funding, and they have announced it for the next 3 years. So that's really good because we're able to plan. So in June, Charlotte Quinn will be bringing a homeless prevention grant spending plan for the next 3 years. And I'm pleased to say it was a couple of £100,000 more than we thought we were getting, and it now combines our domestic abuse funding and our rough sleeper funding all in one sum. So I'm really pleased. So we can now take our preventing homelessness and rough sleeping strategy that we adopted last November, align that with our spending plan, and be able to hopefully meet all our objectives, and most importantly supporting the residents that face homelessness. Regarding the Renters' Rights Act, yes, so part 1 was adopted on the 27th of December 25. Part 4 is due to be adopted on the 1st of May 26, and it's part 4 that's, part 1, sorry, I've got them the wrong way around. Part 1 is May, and that's the one that's going to have a lot of implications for us regarding our workload. So we do have a project plan. It's being led by John Corrie, who's our private sector housing manager. Within that plan is a private landlords forum, which is taking place on the 20th of February, and invites will be going out shortly. And we also have a members briefing within our project plan just to go over really the high level implications of the Renters' Rights Act. You're quite right, we got £4 a property, so when you times that by just over £8,500, that isn't a lot of money. However, we have been supported by ELB, and we have been given permission to extend our resources in that team. So we are now going to look for an apprentice for 2 years, and also a tenancy relation officer. And we've been working with Test Valley Borough Council to do that, so we can have posts that mirror each other. And until we start to do the work, we won't know what that really looks like. in reality. So the idea is the apprentice will work across the housing options team and the private sector housing team to make, so when somebody presents to housing options, for example, and they say my landlord served notice, there's an inordinate amount of administration burden now, because say the landlord is serving that notice because they want to sell the property, we have to make sure that landlord now doesn't advertise that property for the next, I think it's 4 months. So there's about 25 or 30 new administrative burdens just on the tenancy reform. We also have 59 pieces of new data that we have to collect from July and return that quarterly. So we're doing that voluntarily at the moment to see what that looks like and how much time that takes. And then you've got parts 2 and part 3, which is the landlord database and the private landlord ombudsman and the decent homes, and the government have changed direction, and the database is now going to be administered by the local authority. We thought it wasn't going to be, but also the local authority are going to have to be responsible for uploading all the landlords' documentation. We thought the landlords would have to be responsible for that. So there will be new burdens funding for the next few years. We just don't know how much that is. The idea is, if landlords aren't adhering to the Renters' Rights Act, you can take enforcement action and civil penalty notices, and they range from £7,000 to £44,000. We won't know until we start doing the work how many cases that might take action. Obviously, we'd always rather work proactively with our landlords to avoid enforcement action, and it may be that if we find that we have to take that action and we're successful in the fines and that they pay the fines, then that may be able to increase our resources. And obviously we're working with our colleagues with LGR Lumen to make sure that our teams are mirroring each other. So thank you.
Thank you.
And there's a kind of a quite a broad risk here, which is anecdotally, I think, I don't know what other colleagues' views are like from their wards, but there's a sense that perhaps landlords are exiting the market before this comes in. Certainly picking up that people are being served with no fault eviction notices to get them out before this comes in. So we're aware of this risk, and we're keeping an eye on it, because at the very most extreme end, this could find people with nowhere to live, frankly, and then who knows what it will do to to rent as well. One would expect it will drive rents up. So there's a lot to just be aware of, and we're considering these issues. I think we talked about the fines. I think I'm right in saying that we retain any fine, and just to stress that point, it starts at £7,000. That is the minimum penalty, and I think we will see what compliance is like, and the private landlords are an important part of our housing mix, but if we have anyone who's behaving rogue, I think the message is we will come down on them as hard as we can, and we'll do it soon, just to make it really clear that you cannot be a rogue landlord in Winchester District. We won't tolerate it, and we will take the fines, and we will use that to further the service. So hopefully it won't come to that, and that's why we've got this session on the 20th of this month to meet with landlords and letting agents as well, just because we want to work with people. We don't want to have to fine people, but the penalties are there if people misbehave, frankly. Councillor Power, next.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is also about the Renters' Rights Act. The history of courts in imposing a level of fine commensurate with the cost of taking that landlord to court, I'm thinking of TPOs and fly tipping as examples, is not good. Do we have any expectation that the fine will cover the cost of taking them to court? And I have a second question on LGR, Chairman, which we'll take separately, I think.
Just before I pass over to officers, fly tipping is a really good analogy here. There is a sense that, it is frustrating how long this process takes, but the approach we've taken on fly tipping, like in the Councillor Cutler to my right, is to make examples of people. If you go and dump a fridge freezer in a lay-by in our district, we will come down on you. And of course there's a financial calculation there of fines, but actually it's that message that you will be going to court and you'll be getting a criminal record if you fly tip in our district. And that's exactly the approach we'd like to take under Renters' Rights Act. Officers.
Thank you, Councillor. It's really hard to answer that question until we take a test case through the court process, because also we're working very closely with our legal team, but it's also with the backlog of the courts, how long will it take for any case to go through the court. But we can give out some notices without going through the court process. It really depends whether that landlord works with us and pays the notice. They pay the notice for some of the offences, it won't need to go to court. So it really depends if they appeal the offence and it has to go through the court process. So we won't really know until so what we will need to do is, as a council, is adopt a new enforcement policy, because this is a standalone act and it's not covered by any other housing act. So in June, we're hoping to the next committee to bring the new enforcement policy, which then allow us to take that action. And I'm not too concerned because it doesn't go live until the 1st of May. I'm not too concerned about adopting that strategy in June, or the policies are in June, because the likelihood of being ready to take any action in June is very remote. Thank you. Sorry, I can't give you a definite answer.
Thank you, Chairman, again. My second question relates to LGR. I was under the happy impression that the segregation of the HRA in our accounts would make the transfer of governance under LGR a great deal easier. But there's a hint in this paper that we cannot just transfer that set of budgets and financial information and staff and resources in toto. Could you amplify that risk for me, please?
I'll probably Councillor Mr. Hendy.
Right.
Oh, Councillor Cutler, you go first.
Well, I was just going to say the two separate things. I mean, so much of the Renters' Rights Act and that side of things is in the general fund side of things. So that's the bit that will need to be dealt with through LGR, as is homelessness. So you know, all those elements of our housing policy will be affected by LGR. Yes, the HRA stuff may be able to transfer relatively unscathed, but and a couple of things I was going to also mention in relation to what we've just been speaking about. I mean, first is that because of the risks around homelessness and homelessness grants, we did create a reserve of 750,000 in that reserve next year for unforeseen effects of homelessness. And I think when we go back, talking back about the comparison with fly tipping, we have seen that it works as a deterrent. I would suggest that we shouldn't be looking to fines to fund anything, and you know, I mean, I think that would be a bonus if there were some, but I don't think that could be factored into any budgeting on this.
There's a lot of unknown things around local government reorganisation and what it means for the housing service. We're just getting into it now, and I'm deeply concerned around the requirement to seek approval for even minor expenditure, which comes in September of this year. So I've asked the council's legal director to seek approval or to seek clarity from the ministry as to whether we can carve out operational decisions that just keep our housing service working, because it's such a huge part of what we do. And if we have to seek approval for every time we let a contract, many of these contracts are above the threshold we believe that government will impose. I mean, we will just get bogged down. This is something we'll talk about a lot, I'm sure, over the coming months. But it's on our to-do list and one of my worry beads. Councillor White, you had a question.
You've already answered it. It was about the Renters' Rights Bill and whether we have the resource to fulfil our duties. So thank you.
So if there's no further questions, we have some recommendations. Councillor Horrell.
Sorry, just one point of detail, Chair, if I may. In 1111, we talk about 391 properties from RPs from affordable housing providers in the area, i.e. not us. Do we know, and we had that very good map from Caroline earlier, do we know where and what they look like? What are we expecting from others? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. I don't have that information to hand, but we can certainly run a report to see the registered providers' properties that have been advertised from April last year to March this year. So maybe after the end of the financial year, we can run a report on A, how many, and B, what size for the RPs, if that would be helpful.
And also where they are, because I think we saw on the map, that was quite helpful to us. So if we had that overlay, it would just give us that incremental piece of information. Thank you.
It might be something to put in the next regular update on new homes. Would that be the right place in which to put it, I think? So we'll take that action. Excellent. So any further questions? Okay. So the recommendations are page 34. So I'll just have to read them out. Bear with me. So yes, page 34. So the recommendations are that this committee, and I'm afraid there's only cabinet members, I think, right, who can note these. Number one, note that the progress of the objectives against year 2 of the housing strategy delivery plan as outlined in the report.
Agreed.
Thank you. And second, that we note the emerging challenges that have arisen since November of 2024.
Yep.
And thirdly, that we approve the amended delivery action plan for the period 2023 to 2028.
Agreed.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you. So we now move to agenda item number 10. This is Yvonne. Sorry, I was jumping the gun before. On antisocial behaviour policies, which starts at page 71 in your agenda pack. There are a number of policies within this. Again, the TAC board, who I'll mention again, two members of which are sat in the corner, we went through these. You're nodding good, and you feel like you had an opportunity to comment and contribute, which is very helpful. I'm sure we'll go into more detail of the consultation that we went through in putting these together. The thing to stress here is these policies are quite technical. We engaged an outside body, Resolve, who are recognised as leaders in this field, to help us generate these, and we consulted them with tenants as well. Crucially, what this does is it sets out a very clear understanding for everyone as to what we consider to be antisocial behaviour. Because in the past, I think we took quite a liberal view of what antisocial behaviour constituted, which meant that we were huge amounts of reports we were trying to deal with. What this does, it really focuses in on those things which seriously affect people's lives, and makes it really clear what we consider to be antisocial behaviour. And it also makes it clear what may be, annoying, maybe unpleasant, maybe some sort of something else, but that isn't antisocial behaviours, just so everyone's clear. So that's the kind of the core purpose of what we've done here. And these address, we'll come on to in the next paper, the next paper, tenant satisfaction measures, which we have not scored particularly well on an antisocial behaviour in the past, which was one of the impetus to refresh these policies and make it clear. So Yvonne, I'm going to pass over to you if you would like to talk through this paper, please.
Thank you, Councillor Weech, appreciated. So just to bring colleagues up to speed, essentially we identified that customers weren't satisfied with our response to managing antisocial behaviour, and we felt that an independent review would be really helpful with that. So we engaged Resolve, who are our community safety experts, and did a lot of work with them about making change or considering how we could improve the customer experience and also improve the opportunities for colleagues to do well in supporting our customers in relation to that. Resolve did some great work in terms of engaging lots of stakeholders, including members, customers, and also partner agencies as well. And from that, they made a significant number of recommendations about the things that we needed to improve. Brought to committee this morning for your review and approval, and I think it's fair to say that customer feedback, in relation to what customers wanted to see, was really helpful and certainly informed the way that we took forward this review as well. And the recommendations from Resolve around policies, around resourcing, around improving the customer journey, and also improving our systems, all of which are included in key pieces of work that we'll be taking forward. So a significant piece of work that colleagues have done, and huge thanks to Resolve, and give them the recognition for giving us that honest challenge, which we welcomed and which they commented on, that actually we were open to making sure that we made things better. And everybody in the service, it's fair to say, is committed to moving from a judgment where we are now to a C1, and that's one of our commitments through this piece of work, is to support that. Thank you.
Just for it is in the paper, I'm sorry, I haven't got the reference. For the committee, could you just set out who this policy would apply to? So the cases in which it would apply.
Thank you, Councillor Roots. It would apply to all of our tenants living in properties, also to shared owners and leaseholders. It wouldn't necessarily apply to homeowners who may be having an issue with another homeowner who's not within our housing management service. So just to give some clarity around that. So yeah, it would be precisely for our tenants, our leaseholders and shared owners. Thank you.
Again, just to labour the point, so if it involves a tenant, leaseholder, and a private owner occupier, but the private owner occupier was the one to bring the complaint, would this policy be enforced?
It would be, yes. We would take account of their feedback in respect of our customer and how they're managing their home. Yes, thank you.
And then a sort of related question. I assume we'll have questions from colleagues in a second. A related question around other RPs, because I'm aware of issues and nodding all around the table, where you may have, we could have however many RPs we have in the district, where we may have tenants having antisocial behaviour issues with neighbours who may be, in a different RP, and it's all really, really difficult to resolve. What would our role be in that, and how would this policy affect that, if at all?
Thank you for your question. And I think we work really closely with our partner agencies. And so there are regular meetings, multi-agency meetings that we have with those organisations to make sure that we are all committed to our obligations around managing antisocial behaviour. And we will seek to hold them to account, but also we'd work with our community safety partnership team as well. So there's multifaceted approach to be able to manage those things with those colleagues as well. Thank you.
So just to be clear, we've talked about partner agencies. It's set out in the paper at page 86, but just so we're all clear who they are, I will list them. These would include police, education, fire and rescue service, community safety, environmental health, social care, mental health, victim support, and the wider voluntary sector. So there's a lot of people that we do work with. Thanks for that. So questions from Councillor Horrocks, please.
Chair, I'm grateful for you asking the question about who this policy would apply to, because if you look at page 84 of the report, it says where the victim or alleged perpetrator is not a council tenant or connected to a council tenancy, we will signpost or refer the matter to the community safety team. So if you've got tenant and homeowner, and the homeowner is the one saying, I have a problem with the tenant of our tenant, we wouldn't deal with it. It would go to community safety. Is that correct? I'm confused by the words and what the answer to the question was earlier about who this applies to, because very often there are different views about what is acceptable, and it may not be tenant on tenant. It may be tenant with another type of resident.
I'm hoping I'm right. Correct me if I'm not. I think I understand the wording isn't completely clear. There's page 84 under scope for reference. I think it's the case where party A or party B, if either of them are a tenant or leaseholder, whether or not they're the perpetrator or the victim, this policy would apply. So in your case, this would apply and wouldn't be handed off to a community safety team.
Could I ask then, Chair, that we look at that wording, because when you read it, it doesn't provide the clarity that you have helpfully just articulated. Chair, may I just ask another supplementary on that same page? Under policy statement, it says taking a victim-centred, proportionate and fair approach to tackling ASB. I think that would be really helpful to have clarity about what that means in terms of expectations. I think many victims think we're able to do more than perhaps we are. And I think understanding that, given we're rewriting this, it's a great opportunity for us to be very clear about, as I say, the expectations. Thank you.
So, I mean, I'm sure we can. You might have an idea as to how to clarify that, so I'll pass over.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback, and absolutely we can make sure that we cover that off so there is clarity on that point. Yeah, that's no problem at all. Thank you for that.
Any further questions? Oh, Okay, carry on, please. Keep on.
Sorry, it sounds as if I've dealt with a lot of these, which I have. Can I just ask, examples of issues not normally being ASB, and we've got parking disputes, in my observation, they often start with parking, they might escalate to other things. Unfortunately, other things get rolled in. It says unless linked to threats, harassment or repeated obstruction. I'm just conscious that the, as you say, parking can start as being quite simple, but rolls forward. And if we're saying, well, if it's parking, we're not dealing with it, you know, are we just waiting for the next level to escalate? Question. I see why you're trying to not include it, because you could be forever dealing with, you know, they took my space. But the nature of lack of space and lack of parking in many of our developments just comes up time and time again. Thank you.
And just before I pass over, I mean, I would stress, yeah, we've all dealt with these issues all right across the district. You know, the police are there. You know, we are not. One of the things we're trying to do here is to not become a kind of a police force where the police are stepping back, but recognise that there is an interim step before it reaches that threshold. So.
Thank you, Councillor Reach. Thank you, Councillor Horrell, for your question. So I think parking, as you say, parking is quite controversial and quite sensitive on our estates. And I think we would be looking to understand actually who owns the land and who's responsible for enforcing parking in that area. So it would be something we would check. We would have conversations, but we would try not to make that protracted because parking management is bigger than just the housing team. So I think it's fair to say we would investigate, we would follow up, but so that things don't escalate to the way that you have described, essentially, whilst making sure we're pulling on all those partners that we can also engage with as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, encouraging the police to support us perhaps more obviously might be helpful too. We should ask the Chief Inspector.
And I would add, I'm not sure why constitutionally it happens this way, but the Chief Inspector comes to the Town Forum, which I know only represents the town wards, but she does report back to that. And reported actually on a kind of broader Winchester basis, so it's a bit weird and might be something we have to look at. And it goes to scrutiny as well, of course. So scrutiny committee would have representation from across the district. And you know, the Chief Inspector, we're really grateful because she gives a lot of detail and is receptive to precisely these sorts of issues. So I'd encourage colleagues to keep raising these as well with the Chief Inspector. Any further questions? Councillor Power.
I think it's more of a comment, Chairman, and this refers to the previous paper as well. Staff don't go and work in housing without an overwhelming desire to make life better for a lot of people. And I think we have a tendency as a councillor and as councillors to say, job done, problem solved, review, assess, monitor, but we don't celebrate enough the amount of work that has gone into generating these policies and building these houses. And I think we need to shout a bit louder about what has been achieved and is continuing to be achieved by our housing department. Thank you.
Thank you for those warm words. I'll reiterate again, you know, the work is really good. I would also pay tribute to tenants, not just the members of the TAC board, although they do work really hard. You know, there's a lot of tenant engagement has gone into this. And we're really heartened by the responses, the level of responses we got to our consultation of tenants. It was over 300, I think, which in previous, that is an order of magnitude higher than we've had in previous years, which itself is testimony to the outreach work that officers do to make sure that tenants are responding. So I absolutely echo those comments. Councillor White.
So I know it's not an exhaustive list on the neighbour nuisance, but something's just occurred to me that happened in our ward. So if someone's not looking after their property as a tenant, for example, if they're hoarding or and then to the extent that it's infested with rats, for example, then that impacts on the neighbouring properties. Would that come under that's not antisocial behaviour necessarily? Is that neighbour nuisance? I'm not clear.
Thank you for your question. I think that's a really interesting question, and I think hoarding is so complex, and we have a number of colleagues who support customers who are hoarding. So that is a pest issue, because actually it's affecting the home, it's affecting our assets, it's affecting our neighbourhood. So it's likely we would deal with that under the antisocial behaviour policy or in some form of tenancy support, because what we're looking to achieve is to help that person sustain their tenancy whilst managing that asset, whilst reassuring customers that we are dealing with it, because there are so many issues around hoarding, including fire safety as well. So we are obligated to step in through tenancy management and support somebody to address that, hopefully to a point that we're satisfied and that they feel safe at home, or potentially we may have to enforce, but that would be the option of last resort, essentially. Thank you.
Any further questions? No, good. Well, thank you again. A lot of work's gone into this, and again, thank you to everyone who's contributed, particularly those who aren't sat around the table. It's a good piece of work. We took a couple of actions away, just points of clarity around victim perpetrator, and I can't remember the second one was, but I'm sure you had it. Kind of making it clear. Yeah, so you have that written down. So I again slightly oddly refer to colleagues either side of me to the recommendations on page 72, which I will have to read out. So it's that we approve and adopt the 3 housing antisocial behaviour policies. So that is the antisocial behaviour policy, the hate crime policy, and the good neighbour policy. Approved? Agreed. Thank you. And the second recommendation is that we give delegated authority to the corporate head of housing in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Good Homes to make any minor amendments to the policies. Are you happy with those?
Agreed.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you very much. Give me a second while we move on to the next. So that will be agenda item number 11, which starts at page 147 in your agenda pack. So for this, we've got Sarah Hobbs here to support, and this paper from 147 is the Tenant Partnership Annual Report. It's the Partnership and Influence Plan, so the way that we actually work with our tenants. Again, the feedback that we've had with our refreshed policies, so looking back to the previous paper, has generally been that there's been a marked improvement in the way that we work with our tenants, and again, nodding from members in the corner, which I'm pleased to see, and in particular that we are now using plain English, which I think was a verbatim comment that came through, that it's good, so it's clear to understand what we are trying to achieve, and we've stripped away a lot of the jargon. So if you're happy, I'll just pass over if you'd like to give us a very quick run through of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reach. I sit here today really proud of the work of the team and the tenants, because this is our first piece of work where it's been co-produced, so done with, not to. So I just want to give recognition to everyone that's been involved in that, because I think that shows the significance in our journey. We're not perfect, we know that, and we welcome all the feedback, and of course know we need to do more working alongside and with our ward members. But yeah, this replaces the previous housing engagement communication plan, which was a really good foundation and bedrock around how we intended to work with our tenants and residents, and importantly communicate. We know communication is a strong theme wherever we go, and whatever we hear, whether that's informal or informal. So hopefully this document sets out in plain English and is a marked difference to maybe previous documents, a real shift in that culture of working with, and will underpin a lot of our other policies and procedures going forward. So the team have worked with a specific group, a policy co-creation group now, which is tenants and residents from our communities that come along and are involved from the start. That's the criticism we've had before. We have listened and we're seeking to improve all of the time. So the paper really introduces sort of the backdrop of where we were, the journey we're on, obviously taking into account our tenant satisfaction measures. The two are so intrinsically linked. The consumer standards, the regulator of social housing, their clear expectations around really embedding that tenant voice as well. So it's really, yeah, as I say, I sit here on behalf of, officers and tenants and members who have been involved in this process to date, just to introduce it and welcome any questions or comments. Thank you.
And I would say, in the introduction, we talk about how one of the reasons we're doing this is because we had an unsatisfactory rating from the social housing regulator. That's sort of the least important reason we're doing it. We're doing it because actually, you know, we should be communicating better, and about a quarter of complaints that we've received in the past have related to communication. So we know that this is an issue. And further, a lot of that relates to, it's outside the scope of this particular paper, but around repairs. And I know, Councillor Power, you've been quite rightly fighting for your residents a number of times on repairs, which we have not done as good a job as we should have done on them. So this is part of a much wider picture, trying to improve that. We will, I'm not sure when the next update on the repairs and maintenance procurement is, but we must be due one pretty soon. We talked about that some months ago, it seems now, it was some months ago, about how that will improve communication with tenants and actually managing the repairs better. So this is one piece of the puzzle to improve the communication with our tenants. Do we have any questions? Councillor White?
So I can see from the report there are quite a lot of efforts made to be inclusive across the district, including the rural areas, you know, the community hubs. There's been the odd workshop in Bishop's Waltham and things. And I note in the equality impact report, it mentions about attendance data, and a list of sort of barriers of why people might not be able to attend. I wonder whether you've noticed any trends in people in rural areas not attending, perhaps because of barriers to public transport, for example, and things like that.
Thank you for the question. I think it's early days. We recognise data is insight and we need to turn that into action. So we are collating now who's attending, asking questions. When we are running our housing improvement workshops across the district, we use a combination of tenant feedback, TSM scores and dissatisfaction, and just to help shape and influence. And then the tenant partnership team go out and do some outreach. Again, I know the absence of me commenting on working with ward councillors, and that is on our action plan. My colleague in tenant partnership will be driving that forward at the request. So thank you for your patience. We know we need to link in and come to where you already have things in your parishes and districts. We do try to support those sorts of barriers around transport, so we can organise taxis and things for people to come along. So that is an offer. So again, when we work more closely with yourselves, we can make sure you understand what we're doing. But it is early days, and I think, you know, we were criticised quite rightly at the beginning because we've made it very city centre and in certain schemes. So we continue to learn and evolve. This is our second year doing things sort of differently, and we'll continue to sort of take that feedback from our members and ward members. We also know we have a lot of work to do in our tenant data space. So one of our intentions in a funding bid that's gone in is to create a tenant voice panel, which would have a very specific focus on equality, diversity and inclusion. So again, looking across our service, and you know, we're starting to collect more equality, diversity information when people register or invited, but it's still very uncomfortable for people. So again, we need to do that, working with to, you know, have tenant champions and a tenant voice panel to really bring that to life, so that people are reassured where perhaps for whatever reason they've not been previously, and that might not be with the council, it could be from another consumer group, that they've not felt their data's been looked after properly or used for the right purposes. So work to do, but welcome any feedback from yourselves as well. Thank you.
And this is, you know, again, we're learning and we're improving, and I think we're already getting good feedback of some of the, you know, outreach work that we're doing. It is a bit disappointing sometimes when attendance has been quite low at one or two of the events, but I think, you know, I think there is still benefit in going, if at least to get out and go and see, you know, the beautiful district that we live in, and we again just encourage members to drum up support wherever possible. It struck me that, you know, someone reminded me at the TAC board that, you know, there is no bus from Denmead, Southwark and Wickham to Winchester. It's 2.5 hours by public transport, and really expensive because it involves taking a train all the way around. So, you know, reminding ourselves that this is, you know, we need to keep challenging ourselves to do better. Who do we have next? Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. I speak as the councillor for Luddites. I know I see the commitment to servers look after the digitally excluded, which make me feel a bit fingerless. I don't see that in practice. I will be shouting very loud if I do see that. But there seems to be a reluctance on the part of officers to actually pick up the phone. You can't rely on the post to advise tenants of an appointment, because by the time they get it, it's too late to arrange cover for work. It doesn't work. Can we please make sure that is stuck to in practice as well as in principle?
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. And I think as the same as the tenant data, this is a work in progress. So any feedback, any challenge in particular areas where, and also where it has worked well, would be welcomed. Certainly it's something that our TAC board members and tenants challenge us on continuously to do better, to not exclude or, marginalise groups. So it's a work in practice, but thank you.
I would add to that, absolutely. We need to make sure that all groups are included. What I would say though, it is an extremely expensive way of communicating with people, and we have to cut our cloth accordingly here. So we just need to make sure that the best thing we need to be doing is getting people comfortable and happy to use digital tools where they can. But recognizing there will be some people for whom that is not what they want to do. Yes, you're making phone symbols indeed. But my point is that this is paid for from within tenant funds here, and having officers on the telephone is a very expensive use of a very scarce resource. But we will do it where it's necessary. My point is we also need to make sure that we're getting feedback on the app that we have. So there might be some people on the edge who aren't comfortable with it, and frankly, our app and tech that we've had so far has been a bit rubbish, but that is going to be improved. We have a particular target to drive use of the My Winchester Tenancy app up from 30 something to 75%. So it's a big challenge to get there, particularly people who might be reluctant to use it. But that's something that we're going to try and do, because that is really got to be the best way to get in touch with us. But recognizing there will be some people for whom the phone is really important, and we'll keep doing that. Was it on that point? Yes, Councillor Cullen.
Yeah, I think the important thing is to drive up the use where you can, and then have a really clear sort of understanding who the people who will never be in that position, and that if that's a very low number, then it's far easier to deal with. So it's still really important to encourage those that can to use those digital techniques.
Councillor Hall.
Chair, thank you. And firstly, well done to Sarah and the team, because I know you've tried really hard in the last year to put all sorts of balls in the air and see how you can best engage with tenants. And I think that is to be encouraged. Some things have worked better than others, we know, but the fact that you've tried multiple things and continue to do so is a really excellent step forward. I think the fact that we've got new ideas, but also some old ones coming back, again, should be encouraged. That whole approach, I think, is to be welcomed. And I know, as Councillor Reach said, we've got sort of regulatory requirements, but overall, we want our tenants to feel that they're respected and they're loved, and that we want their communities to be as great as possible. So this interaction is really important. So well done, and keep going, even though only one person might turn up sometimes. So I suppose my question though is a build on what's been mentioned slightly, is I'm not sure you're making best use of your councillors. We're sort of, many of us are keen, we very much bedded in our communities, particularly in rural communities where it's smaller and you're slightly perhaps more integrated. And I think any element that we can help and be involved. And I sort of I read the report, and I didn't see councillor mentioned in the actual plan itself. And I just encourage you to do more of that. There are 45 of us out there who can be your legs and eyes and ears. And I know that everyone would want to do the best for their community. So please embed us more in all of that you're trying to do. Thank you.
And I would just add to that point on, the previous paper on antisocial behaviour, it was a question on the members' briefing we had. Members are often the first people who are trusted to be aware of an issue involving antisocial behaviour, and what is the correct course for that councillor then to take that is consistent with our policies and processes. So perhaps something similar here would be really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. And as I said, Annie in tenant partnership team will be starting to coordinate a lot of that plan and getting out to the community. So coordinating boots on ground. We also know we want to embed, as it sets out in the plan, tenant engagement and tenant partnership confidence across the housing services. So there'll be training and rolling out. So we'll have more officer, and obviously with the strength of 45 ward members, we'll look to absolutely monopolise on that, because I know the offer has been consistently there. And thank you, we're readying up now. Thank you.
If I could just ask, Chair, I think there's a real benefit to Winchester City Council as well, that when the tenant population feels that they're being well looked after, the view of the council is a good one. I see that in various communities that I represent. We've done a really great job. There's a halo for actually the councillors are not the ones who didn't do A, B and C, but actually you did X, Y and Z. And I think that we shouldn't underestimate that broader influence that you have, certainly in the communities where they're perhaps slightly more close-knit. So thank you.
And certainly look and feel of the place as well, well looked after council homes lead to well looked after communities, and exactly as you say, it's really important. We'll move to the recommendations then on page 148. So the recommendations before us are that the Cabinet Committee Housing approve and adopt the Tenant Partnership and Influence Plan. Is that approved? Thank you. And second, that we delegate authority to the Corporate Head of Housing in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Good Homes to make any minor amendments to the plan.
Agreed.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Sarah, you stay in the hot seat as we move on to agenda item 12, which is around tenant satisfaction measures. Now, we talked a lot about this and throughout this meeting. The key part of this paper is on page 195, which sets out how we've performed against the tenant satisfaction measures. There were 12 set by the social housing regulator that we and other authorities are measured against. And you'll see that our performance measured against the benchmark is good in 10 of those 12, and the 2 should have come as no surprise if you've been paying attention through this meeting, which I know you all have, that antisocial behaviour we haven't scored particularly highly on, which is TP12, and also, bless you, TP11 making a positive contribution, which is a slightly odd metric, but that's to the wider community, isn't it? Is how that's being measured. Would you like to introduce this paper, please?
Thank you, Councillor Reach. So you've heard mention of this throughout this morning's meeting, really, and it's just to say, yes, we are performing well in 10 out of our 12 metrics according to our responses. So we're really pleased and have made some sort of progress in areas where the previous year, like communal areas, we've significantly improved by a 10% increase. So really pleased to see that, and that sort of robust contract management and eyes out on our estates and in our blocks and districts. The 2 that remain sort of below are key areas, but before I kind of go to that, is just highlighting how we use this importantly each year. So it is one metric. It's one metric that enables us to benchmark, so that is always very useful, but it shouldn't be looked at in isolation. So Councillor Reach mentioned sort of our complaints data, looking at that, just looking at our conversational satisfaction data. We launched our repairs satisfaction data. So we are starting to move more into a shift of intelligent use of data and pulling it together. And certainly over the next year, I hope this time next year we'll be able to bring back further insight around how our data and feedback from residents in our communities have really driven a lot of the work we've done. So yeah, we continue to have that strong focus on ASB. You've heard that today, our antisocial behaviour, and that was a focus last year. So we'll run the satisfaction, and the hope will be that goes up with the approved policies, and that putting that policy into practice on the ground, communicating well with our ward members, our residents and tenants and communities, and having those really strong partner agency relationships as well. So makes a positive contribution, again, leads into how are we maximising our work across the district and working with partner agencies, having that visibility. So there are some really good working relationships we have, but we'll be looking to build on that further over the coming year. Just to give a nod to complaints, so complaints are always a learning opportunity. We still continue to get, you know, a fair number of complaints, but low in the proportion of households we're here to support and serve. And we're starting to try and look at those trends and themes. What has come out of this over the last year is launching a complaints focus group, again, working with our residents. It's new and early. Also, complaints policy is currently going through co-production. That feels the right thing to do and linked to what we've just talked about. So I hope to report more positive feedback again next year. We know the key themes from this year's survey shifted much more to communication, feeling heard and listened to. We have done a lot of consultation in various means, but I think an unintended consequence can sometimes be survey fatigue and people are just exhausted. So as a team, we've gone out and tried to really get feedback everywhere we can, and now we need to take a bit of a pause and look at how we plan that in our calendar year with known committee things. We know we have our HRA consultation on budget. We'll know we'll have an annual tenant satisfaction measures, and then how do we get much smarter at transactional at the end of each process, asking short surveys, which will come with our digital transformation work. So it's going to be an exciting year, of course, continuing to work with our tenants and residents, because that's why we all work in housing and across the district. But yeah, I'll pause there because I feel like I might just be rambling and let everyone.
No, you're certainly not rambling. It's
questions.
Certainly not rambling. It is really important stuff. I mean, just a couple of things to call out before we take questions. I think TP10, which is around communal areas, you know, we've seen a 10 percentage point increase in that on the previous year. Now that's really, really good to see. I certainly, again, anecdotally, had complaints a few years ago from the upkeep of communal areas. They don't seem to have come through. I mean, I'm sure there are areas where we can still improve, but really should call out, and particularly Blue Frog's our contractor on there. They've done a really excellent job there at improving the cleanliness of communal areas. And I think overall, I mean, we shouldn't forget, you know, the benchmark 69% and overall TP1 at 78%, which puts us in the upper quartile of authorities. So, you know, we should go for the upper quintile next, decile if we're really going for it. So we should, but again, call out that, you know, the overall satisfaction is good, but a lot of the actions we've talked about today are focusing on the areas where we could do better. So yeah, so we look forward to next year, everything being up in the green and everything going up even higher. Any questions? Councillor Horrell?
Thank you, Chair, and I personally value this as a sort of benchmark against others and the trending across the period and the focus on the sort of two key areas that popped out as being perhaps less than satisfactory. But of course, when you drill down, that's at the top level, but when you drill down, you see area comments, you see age comments, etc., all helpful to all of us, I think. I'm intrigued that the under 35s remain least satisfied with repairs. And I'm just wondering, what is it about that particular younger group who are just not happy, even though we're really striving to improve? Why is it that younger group, do we know why that is, and should we be doing anything about that? Or is that particularly the type of accommodation they're in? I don't know. There might be other physical factors impacting that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and question. I don't think it's fair for me to sit here and say we know exactly, because again, we need to go and do some targeted work with them to ask. However, some assumptions I think we can draw from some of the knowns is often they're within that working age category. The complaint themes we see, particularly from repairs, is, you know, multiple missed appointments. I've had to take time off work again or off of caring responsibilities. I just want an update. So often people come through when we look at the journey, when people move into our housing service, it's very digital. I appreciate that's not a suitable approach for everybody, but where it is a preference, it then tailors off in landlord services and housing at the moment. So our digital offer isn't as good as it could be, where they could receive more timely updates and things. That certainly is an ambition to address that as part of the new repairs and maintenance contract. So I think some of those assumptions and what we know about those age demographics can be drawn from that, but actually it gives us a really good insight into how we engage that group and ask them more through some focus groups and such, which we know we've seen work well in sort of solar panel workshops and things.
Thank you.
Councillor Becker.
Thank you. I was really pleased to hear about the plans for dealing with this handling complaints issue, because I was shocked when the national benchmark is at 31%. That I find that absolutely baffling, that is considered to be the target that above which you're considered to be achieving well. So my question really is, do we have an internal target that's higher than that? So we're not saying, well, if we've reached 31%, we're doing well. Is there something that internally we say, well, actually for us, that's not satisfactory. We want to be at this level, and that will be when we're happy.
It's a really good question, thank you. We have obviously our corporate KPIs at 90% and 100% to respond in time. However, we're looking to go much further and deeper than that in terms of the quality of responses and things. That's where the work with the complaints focus group, our scrutiny now on our policy and procedures, and we've had some internal officer meetings as well around, that empathy. So if you look at the Housing Ombudsman dispute resolution, there's 3, key principles: being fair, treating people fairly and with respect, resolving things, giving a good redress, and I've now forgotten the third one, which I knew would happen, but they're very clear. We embed them in our staff training, and actually the sector are seeing an increase in complaints handling, but that's because the Housing Ombudsman have driven it up quite rightly. It all goes back to tenant voice and tenants having a voice and not being fobbed off or, not felt heard and being taken through a transparent process. So I think that's work that needs to come for Winchester, certainly within our housing service, what our targets look like. And again, I'd like to hope that we set that with some of our tenants as well. But yeah, thank you.
And I'd say it's always a challenge with complaints, isn't it? I mean, it is odd that it's only 31%, but if someone is, I guess, motivated and so irritated, angry, upset with how something's been dealt with, to go to raise a formal complaint, it's very hard to turn that into a positive experience. But it's one that we keep challenging ourselves to do better on. Councillor Power, did you have a question? Oh, you sort of made eyes at me, but no, continue making eyes at me if you like, but just were there any other questions? No, well, thank you. Another good one, and yeah, you've taken away a challenge for next year, just to see if we can just keep lifting those. We have some recommendations on page 189 in your agenda pack. So could I ask that the committee note the survey results?
Noted.
Thank you, and that we note the progress made as a result of the previous year's survey results.
Noted.
And that we agree that the work that is underway are proposed to address the 2 indicators that are below median benchmark.
Agree.
Yeah, agree.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. We'll move on to the last agenda item, which is item 13, the Venta Living business plan. We have Mr. Hendy, I think you're the, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name. It's very shameful, but Director, would you like to? Oh, Councillor Batho. Ah, excellent, fine. Councillors Batho and Pett, I know those two. If you'd like to come forward. Just giving a chance for colleagues to get settled. This agenda item 13 starts at page 257 in the agenda pack. There is an exempt appendix to this as well. If members would like to ask questions on that, there's a process we'll do before we get to the recommendations, and we can move into exempt session if that's required. Stan, do you have to introduce this paper, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is the standard report under the shareholders agreement. The council as shareholder requires the company to produce a business plan and present to the council for consideration before the council's budget setting process takes place, because there's two parts of the council's budget setting process that's affected by this. The properties that Venta lease from the council are held in the HRA, the company is held in the general fund, so the council needs to consider that. The Cabinet Committee Housing is viewed under the council's constitution as the one that provides advice to the cabinet to make decisions on the business plan. I know directors are here today to present the business plan and perhaps take any questions you might have before referring on to cabinet.
Then I pass over to the directors.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I have to ask you to bear with me with my rather croaky voice at the moment, but we'll see how far we get, and if not, James will no doubt take over. So, James Batho, Jerry Pett, two of the council member appointed directors of Venta Living. Our chair, Tim Sharp, is in the seats behind us. You'll see from the report and the confidential annex that Venta Living has continued to trade successfully through the past year. I think this time last year we were just at the point of filling Foxglove House and getting all of the units occupied. Pleased to say we did that by the end of the first half of last year. And occupancy has remained high ever since, although there has been some limited churn, as one would expect with any similar sort of properties. The business plan in the exempt annex, you will have seen the projected performance for the company is in fact slightly improved on that we put forward this time last year, and that reflects both the success in gaining 100% occupancy and also the relative lack of churn compared to what we anticipated. I think it would be fair to say. We've had strong feedback from both current tenants and those who've left, all being very complimentary, or nearly all being very complimentary of the service the company has given them and the standard of the properties at Winall in Foxglove House. The only additional point we've put in the report that we didn't cover last year was that having got a year's experience of operating now, there are clearly other areas that we think we could do more for the council as shareholder in and for the community in Winchester at large. So given that the original premise for establishing Venta was to improve the range of affordable housing for rent in the private sector, we think, having made a reasonable fist of Foxglove House, we could look at, for example, the HMO sector and potentially, and I use that word in heavy italics, as it were, potentially we could look at getting into the HMO market, improving the standard of HMOs available, particularly in the vicinity of the hospital, looking at the market for NHS employees and that sort of thing. To do so, clearly we would require a degree of additional funding, and in the circumstances that the City Council finds itself at the moment with LGR and other imponderables, it is clearly not the best time to come to the shareholder and seek further funding. But nonetheless, we would wish to continue looking at the principle of that and the feasibility of that as an activity over the coming year. James, anything to add to that?
No, just to reinforce the sort of intention of Venta was to explore the opportunities for the rental sector, particularly sort of to improve the sort of accessibility of rents from the top end of the social and affordable market into the private rented sector. So it's really that area that I think that the business plan and what the intention of the directors from the renter would like to sort of see us providing an opportunity for that sort of market to be opened up. So I think that's the main direction that we'd like to sort of be looking for the company to go into. Thank you.
Thank you. I've just got a few questions. Perhaps this one might be for Mr. Hendy. On paragraph 12.5, 12.6, you talk. This is building on your comments just now, Councillor Pett, about future opportunities. I'm just not quite clear on if the text says if opportunities were to arise, the directors are willing to engage with the shareholders to assess viability. Is that something internal within Venta that would then be proposed? I'm just not sure the process of how that decision would be made by the City Council.
Well, Chair, I think we've had sort of exploratory talks around this in board meetings with Mr. Hendy in attendance. So clearly, if we were to be in a position where we thought it was a viable thing to do to purchase an HMO property and take that under Venta, then clearly we would have to put a financial case together to bring to the shareholder. Now, we're a long way from that at the moment, but that would, of course, be how we would progress it if that came to pass.
Okay, that's helpful, and we've got. I think it's important that Ventus, explores opportunities where they are, so that the business can keep moving forward. Would be my perspective, but it sounds like it's a long way before we're getting to anywhere near decision making. The bulk of this business plan relates to rent. I mean, that makes sense. That's where the revenue comes from. Could you just set out your proposals and why you arrived at that particular figure, which is set out in the paper, please?
Thank you, Joe. You're talking about the rent increase figure. Yeah. Basically, we did a survey of the private rental market in Winchester, and came up with a figure that pitched ourselves sort of in the middle of that. And of course, we also have the provisions of the Act that came into effect, or but that will come into effect through this year, that says we can't, as we did last year, come up with a figure and say that will be the rental that will apply to each unit in Foxglove House over the coming year. We now have to adjust that for each tenancy as it's let, because we will only have that one shot when the tenant moves in to set that rent for the coming year. That's certainly how I understand it, and therefore it will be a somewhat flexible figure as we move forward.
At the sort of whole premise of Foxglove House was its energy efficiency, and I think that has also been a factor in that. Looking across the market that we have currently in Winchester for rentals that have that level of EPC rating, is really that Foxglove House is one of the sort of top level in terms of the availability. So we felt that that would itself enable a slightly higher rent because of the benefits that would afford to those tenants from the lower costs of energy and the sort of ongoing costs that they would then incur as sort of occupant of that particular rent. So that particular accommodation. So that has been also borne in mind in terms of the decisions that we came to in terms of setting that rent level. So that's part of the overall mix. Thank you.
That makes sense. Thanks for that clarification. I mean, we've talked a lot earlier on in this meeting about the Renters' Rights Act, and you've just touched on one area where that will affect the business. I mean, what assurance can you get? Winchester City Council is the shareholder in Venta Living. But of course, an arm's length company, I think, is the right way to characterise it. Not arm's length, Simon's grimacing. Separate company, but we're the shareholder. It would be really unfortunate if, tenants might find that, there was a breach of the Renters' Rights Act. So I'd like some comfort and that, all of your leases will be compliant and that there's nothing in there that we need to worry about. Perhaps you're not in a position to give it yet, but I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it would be fair to say we're very conscious of the need for due diligence as we move into the implementation of the Renters' Rights Act this year. Certainly, we've got a second independent board member now who's on board, as it were, and we have been doing a lot of work over the last few months looking at what the implications of the Renters' Rights Act will be for Venta. And as you say, the need to set the price of the tenancy at the start of each tenancy is but one aspect of that. But we have been undergoing quite a programme of work, as I think Mr. Hendy will vouch for, over the past few months on exactly that.
It would be good to see some assurance in whatever form that may take. Perhaps there's something we can discuss later, but I think that it's such an important thing. And given my comments before about our approach to enforcement under the Renters' Rights Act, I think my view would be that Venta would have to be absolutely whiter than white. And I'm sure they are, but just some assurance would be helpful. Karen, do you want to jump in and then I'll...
Thank you very much. I just want to say that colleagues have been asked to invite your board members to the Private Landlords Forum on the 20th. Yeah, thank you.
Good. Councillor Battle.
I was just going to say to reassure the panel that obviously Venta takes its services from Winchester City Council, and I actually see that this is actually a beneficial relationship in that we actually are able to provide to Winchester City Council an idea of what is actually happening in the private rental market. So it's not just the ability of Venta to provide that facility for our tenants and our residents, but it's actually the symbiotic relationship that we have in that as the provider of the services to Venta, Winchester City Council is actually benefiting from that feedback, that loop back into the HRA and the overall housing services that it itself is actually then supplying. So in some ways, having Venta, it's an early warning valve, which will allow the council to be aware of some of the issues that their private rented, providers might themselves be suffering. So we have already, in the proposal, suggested that there might be some additional funding needed because of some of the issues around the Renters' Rights Bill, because it will have impacts on us in terms of longer periods of time over which tenants, might dispute rent, and therefore that will actually impact on our business plan. So I think there is actually sort of benefit, and to give you reassurance that obviously we are taking the services from Winchester City Council, and therefore it is your own staff who are actually providing us that service in the end of the actual business. So thank you.
No, thank you. And as I've echoed the comments I made before, it's a new world we're entering into, both the kind of Winchester City Council traditional HRA, Venta, private landlords out there. It just sounds like we need to keep close and keep learning and feeding back and make sure we're aware of what's going on out there. And I'm glad that, I think, Councillor Batho, you did say you'd committed to attending on the 20th of February. So excellent. Now, any questions? Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. £1,100 a month seems an awful lot of money to me, but it would, wouldn't it? The real test of whether the rent is suitable, I think, is in terms of vacant weak units, and that reflects whether the rent is right and also the cost to Venta, which is, and I wonder if it might be better expressed, your void rate, as weeks per unit as a share of void weeks per unit, void weeks for the overall setup, and that might make it clearer as to whether the rent is right and whether the offering is right. My second point is about the HMO market. It seems likely that over the next few months, the owners of HMOs will be exiting that market. And we've seen that the build to rent partner in Central Winchester Regeneration is no longer on board. Is it the impression we have that very small units are going to be an increasing demand in Winchester, and will that impact on our housing needs?
It's a complicated question. I looked to offers. I'm not sure. Do we have that sort of granular data about the local housing market, particularly HMOs and small units?
Thank you. I think it's to say there's still a buoyant HMO market, but I think the offer is changing and the clientele is changing. So there's certainly more high-level HMOs, say more professional, rather than being aimed at the students, because as we know, a lot of our HMOs were for student accommodation. A lot of students are studying from home now, and the universities have their own accommodation. We've also got other public sector agencies are taking on HMOs, such as the Ministry of Justice and the Home Office. So, but obviously we license HMOs, anything that's a 5-bedroom, more than 5 bedrooms, and it's not going down, but it's not specifically going up either. So it's quite stagnant. Thank you.
And I think your comments about the rent at the start, Councillor Power, I think, again, Councillor Bathory, your point was that yes, these are kind of market tested, and but that it's important to stress that particularly at Foxglove House, the energy performance of the units there is so good that people should expect a much lower energy bill than they would, in a drafty old Victorian terrace, for example, where I live. Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 or 3 questions on the report. Under repairs and maintenance, there is the defects work that had to be undertaken during 25. Just wanted to assure us that that was all covered by the contractors. There was no cost to the company. But did some of that work impact the delivery of the sort of better running costs for the new accommodation because of the nature of what was having to be amended? I'm slightly surprised that in the report it said that there is no estimate for any impact of renters' rights, and I think that, based on everything we've heard today, is probably quite a naive position to be in. One would have thought that you might have actually made some estimate of that, because clearly the nature of what you're going to have to do, as the Chair said, is going to be at the very best level of execution. And the other technical point, just maybe it's a mistake, you're asking today for the rent to go up to by 5.26%, but it says elsewhere in the report you've already given notice in January to the residents, and I was just like, have you told them, or is this truly an approval today? Just to be clear, maybe that's just a mistake in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Hendy, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just in relation to repairs, just to remind members that actually the responsibility of repairs and maintenance of the block falls to the council, not to the company. Under the lease, we have to cover that. There were defects to the property, and that's delayed the timescale in terms of letting homes, which, as you can see, impacted on the company's business plan last year. 2 aspects to that, but the main one was around compliance. So that's all the fire risk assessments, the health and safety works, which we wanted to be totally, as I'm sure you would be 100% confident that that was okay. That delayed the lettings. In terms of the impact on the mechanical ventilation heat recovery systems, there have been some issues around that in relation to some of the motors. There have been some complaints by some neighbours living by that's quite noisy. The original contractor Waits have had a responsibility to deal with that, at no cost to us.
And then, councillors, would you mind responding on the question around Renters' Rights Act and the consultation on rent rates with tenants, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think several points there. As Councillor Bathory said earlier, the whole administration piece of the tenancies falls back to Winchester City Council, and Venta pays for that service, and therefore the application of Renters' Rights Act to those tenancies is part of that overall function. So have we put a specific figure on that in the plan? No, but as I say, it falls in as part of that overall function that we're buying from the council itself. In terms of Councillor Horrell asked 5.26%, are we actually asking for agreement for that here, or have we already told people? I stand to be corrected, but I think if we have given that figure to people already, it's because we need to, because their tenancy will be coming up for renewal in the near future, and to keep within the law, we need to pass that on now. Now, clearly, if we don't get agreement from the committee today, then we will be in a different area. But I believe that's the position we're in at the moment. But Mr. Hendy will be able to confirm that or not.
Yes, through you, Chair. This committee is reviewing the business plan and making a recommendation to Cabinet. It's Cabinet that's the decision maker in relation to the business plan, not this committee today.
Yes, that makes sense, because there are only some, when we get to the recommendations, there are only some of them that we are approving. So, Councillor Horrell, do you?
If it's not us, it's still got to go to Cabinet. My question is, have we told residents already that it's going up by 5.26%, or will Cabinet actually be making a positive, proactive decision? It could be that it's endorsing what's already been done. I think we need to be clear about that, thank you, given the significance of it.
It sounds like there might be a sequencing and timing thing here. Yeah, as you say, it may be an endorsement rather than an approval, and this might be something that we need to think of, slightly earlier next time. I think the recommendations are probably fine as they stand, but it does sound like we've got a bit out of process here, but out of sequence. But if you're, does that answer your question? Because it sounds like it's an endorsement rather than an approval in some cases.
I think we just need to be clear. I mean, had let's say the team had come with 50%, if they've already told people, then there's no going back on that. So we need to just be clear in the sequencing of governance, which gets very complicated, I appreciate, but it says elsewhere that residents were told in January. So just clarify. Thank you.
Just bear with us a moment.
Chair, I'm happy to deal with that outside of the meeting if you wish.
Okay, well, in spirit of making progress, if we press on, are there any other questions on the non-exempt bit of the paper? No. What about the exempt appendix? No. Okay, well, yes, sorry.
If I could just come back on Councillor Power's point about the figure in general. I think it would be fair to say that with the cost of the tenancy as it has been over the past year, we've seen no lack of demand through the setting of that figure. Had we done so, then we would have, of course, taken a different view.
Okay, well, subject of discussion offline about endorsement approval and timing, I think we can go to the recommendations, which are on page 258, I think. Just to be clear, we're only taking recommendation 1 at this committee. Recommendations 2, 3 and 4 will go to Cabinet. So recommendation number 1 is to review the updated financial business plan at Appendix A in the exempt part of the agenda and recommend its approval to Cabinet, including A, the proposal to increase rent by 5.26% to £1,100 per month. The proposed move to a dynamic renting model following the implementation of the Renters' Rights, says Bill, Renters' Rights Act in May 2026, allowing for prevailing market rents to apply to individual units at the point of relet. And also C, to note that operating costs have been reviewed and updated in the business plan model. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of the agenda. So thank you. Thanks for the questions, and it's the meeting closed.